So we've talked about one-way ANOVAs. Now we're going to talk about factorial ANOVAs, and I'm going to show you how to do those along with some of the accompanying charts and graphs that you can create in Pspp. So I've changed the board now. What we do with a factorial ANOVA is, remember, in ANOVAs, the independent variable is called a factor. A factorial ANOVA is basically an ANOVA where you're considering more than one independent variable at the same time, more than one factor. And so you're breaking your groups down into further subgroups. So I'll display what I mean. Maybe I decide with this relationship of I'm trying to see if different types of music affects test scores differently, right? Because keep in mind, in this hypothetical study, we are saying that we've already found that music in general improves test scores. And now we're trying to see, is there a difference with different types of music? So we're testing these 3 different types of music. And in this pretend study, we had proposed that class 1 was exposed to classical music. Class 2 was kind of those fan favorite wedding reception songs that everyone knows. And class 3 was just that kind of that relaxing background ambient music. So let's say that I want to propose, maybe there's a difference on age. Like millennials and Gen Z are very much in that age group of we're used to having music playing all the time, no matter what. I was a freshman in high school when iPods came out. So I'm definitely part of the age group that saw that transition of you can have every song that exists that you like on your person all the time. And so you can always have music on. And so it has become more normalized. There's always background music everywhere you go. So maybe I'm proposing, you know what, I think there's also going to be an effect based on age. Or maybe, I'm doing 2 different examples here. Or maybe I'm proposing there's going to be an effect based on your mood when you're taking the test. Listening to music, if you're in a great mood, is going to have a different effect than listening to music if you're in a bad mood. So what we're saying with a factorial ANOVA is that now I'm not just looking at class 1, class 2, and class 3. I'm looking at these 3 different age brackets within each of these classes. So in effect, I have 9 different groups that I'm comparing. I'm comparing Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z in class 1, Gen X, Millennial, and Gen Z in class 2, so on and so forth. Or over here, I would have 6 groups that I'm comparing. That is not at all true. I would have more than 6 groups. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So yeah, lots of allergy medicine today. I would have 6 groups that I'm comparing because I'd have my low mood and my high mood in class 1. I'd have my low mood and my high mood in class 2. And I'd have my low mood and my high mood in class 3. So again, I'm no longer comparing just my 3 classes. I'm looking at a second factor at the same time. Now, you are probably wondering, well, why can't I just do 2 different one-way ANOVAs? I can do an ANOVA for the class, and then I can do an ANOVA for the age group, and I can see if there's an effect of the age group and an effect of the class. And that is true. You can do that. The benefit of a factorial ANOVA is it allows you to see a couple of different things. First of all, it allows you to see if there's an additive effect of these 2 variables if you look at them together. Maybe, yes, remember we saw in our first ANOVA that we did in our first example that the classical music is what had the biggest effect. So maybe we find that if you're in a good mood, that effect is impacted. It's increased. It's still going to have an effect. Maybe it's increased more. Maybe we find if you're in a bad mood, that effect is canceled out. People who listen to classical music in a bad mood are actually closer to the means of the other groups that we're seeing. So maybe we find that it has that modification effect, the additive effect being that it would increase it even further. Or maybe we see that it has an interaction effect in that different ones of these impact different groups differently. Maybe because we saw that the ambient music was not statistically significant, but maybe we have an interaction effect that if your age group falls within Generation X, the ambient music does have a positive effect, or does have a statistically significant effect. So maybe it modifies it where before it wasn't significant and now it is. So an interaction effect, so let me separate these two terms out. So the additive effect is where it's going to increase the impact of the other variable, right? So an example would be, we already found that this one was statistically significant. Maybe being in a good mood further increases the impact of the classical music. An interaction effect is where it's saying that this variable is causing this variable to act differently. So an example of that would be, again, maybe ambient music is only significant for Gen X. Or maybe, I don't know, maybe if you have people who are listening to these, the happy everybody loves this music in class 2, maybe if you're in a bad mood listening to that, it decreases scores in a way that's statistically significant, whereas before this wasn't really an interesting comparison. Nothing was happening either way. Maybe being in a bad mood decreases it because I'm grumpy and you're sitting here playing YMCA while I'm trying to take this test. So an interaction effect is where this variable modifies the way that this variable is working. And it can go either direction. And I'll show you how to do a visual of that graphically. An additive effect is where it's exemplifying the effect that was already there. So this is what a Factorial Anova is looking at. Is it's giving you the power to consider multiple variables at the same time and not just determine, okay, I know this was significant, but was this also significant? It's allowing you to determine, does looking at this picture together give me more information about what is happening here? So that is an introduction to when we would use a Factorial Anova. And now we'll switch over to Pspp, and I'll show you how to do the analysis for it. And then also how to do, for those of you who have said that you're visual people, how to put together some of the graphs. You can do that right in the Pspp software to allow you to see what these effects look like when they're drawn out. Because one thing to be aware of is the way the interaction effect output works in Pspp. You will be able to see a line item about whether or not that interaction was statistically significant, but you can't go further than that. So we might be able to see, okay, there was a statistically significant difference somewhere between the interaction effect of age group and type of music. But it doesn't break it down where we could say, and this was significant in a way that Gen Z was more likely than millennials when listening to classical music to da, 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 da. And again, there are tools that we can use to do that. But if you're wanting to go further and further and further, that is going to require different stats analysis software. I think you can learn some coding for SPSS that lets you go there. But at a certain point, if you're wanting to go into those details, you're going to start doing some other statistical tests anyway. So what we're worried about right now is knowing how to look and see if there was an interaction effect, and knowing how to make the graphs where you can eyeball it to say, okay, I see that there's an effect, and based on the graph, it looks like what's happening here is this group is doing this compared to this group. So we're going to switch over to Pspp. Again, this data is available for you on the course page if you want to download and follow along to make sure you understand what you're doing. We'll switch over to the software for the next video.